I was standing behind the counter, watching my supervisor berate a woman in her 50s over a return policy that didn't even apply to her purchase. His voice was getting louder, and customers were starting to stare. The woman's hands were shaking as she held the receipt. She wasn't angry, just exhausted, like this was the last thing breaking her that day. That's when I did something I'd never done before. I stepped between them and told my supervisor, loud enough for everyone to hear, that he was wrong. His face went red. He pointed at me and said, "You just ended your career here, sweetheart?" The store went silent. But then the woman looked at me with this strange, calm expression and said something that made my blood run cold. Actually, I think her career is just beginning. I had no idea what she meant. I didn't know who she was. But 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the regional office and she walked in wearing a suit with a badge that read CEO. That's when everything I thought I knew about loyalty, justice, and corporate politics got turned completely upside down. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how a single moment of doing the right thing changed my entire life, I need to take you back. 3 months before that day, I was barely holding on. I'd been working at Henderson's department store for 2 years, long enough to know every corner of that place, every difficult customer, every outdated policy we were forced to enforce. My supervisor, Jake Mitchell, had been there for 15 years, and he wore that tenure like a crown. He had this way of making you feel small without ever raising his voice in front of the right people. To management, he was efficient and reliable. To us, the floor staff, he was a tyrant who turned every shift into a test of how much humiliation you could swallow before your next paycheck. I needed this job. My daughter Emma was 7, and after my divorce 2 years earlier, I was barely scraping by on my salary and the pitiful child support checks that came whenever my ex remembered they existed. The apartment we lived in had thin walls and a landlord who raised the rent every chance he got. I couldn't afford to lose this job. And Jake knew it. He knew it about all of us. That's what made him so dangerous. The morning it all started, I dropped Emma off at school like I did every day. She hugged me tight before running off to join her friends, her backpack bouncing against her small shoulders. I remember watching her go and feeling that familiar ache in my chest, the guilt that came with knowing I'd be working late again, that she'd spend another evening with Mrs. Chen next door, eating microwaved dinners and doing homework alone. I promised myself, like I did every morning, that things would get better, that I'd find a way to give her more. I just didn't know how. When I got to Henderson's, the store was already buzzing with the pre-opening rush. Jake was standing near the entrance, clipboard in hand, that tight smile on his face that never reached his eyes. "You're 3 minutes late, Sarah," he said, not looking up. I wasn't. I checked my phone. I was 2 minutes early, but I'd learned not to argue. "Sorry," I mumbled, heading to my station in women's accessories. My coworker Lisa was already there, straightening scarves with shaking hands. She looked like she'd been crying. "What happened?" I whispered, pretending to organize a display of handbags. Lisa glanced toward Jake, who was now talking to another employee across the floor. "He wrote me up," she said quietly. "3rd time this month. 1 more, and I'm out." My stomach dropped. "For what?" "I helped a customer find something in the stockroom. He said I abandoned my post." That was classic Jake. He'd create impossible situations, tell you to never leave your station, then criticize you for not going the extra mile for customers. You couldn't win. I wanted to say something comforting, but what was there to say? We were all trapped in the same cage. The store opened, and the day crawled forward like every other day. Customers came and went. I smiled until my face hurt, folded clothes that would be unfolded minutes later, and pretended that the ache in my feet didn't exist. Around noon, I saw her for the first time. The woman who would change everything. She walked in wearing a simple gray coat and carrying a shopping bag from our store. There was something about her, not flashy or demanding attention, but present in a way that made you notice. She had kind eyes, the kind that looked tired but not defeated. She approached the customer service desk where Jake happened to be standing, reviewing something on the computer. I was close enough to hear when she politely explained that she'd purchased a blender the week before, and it had stopped working. She had the receipt, the original packaging, everything. Our return policy was clear. Defective items could be returned within 30 days with proof of purchase. This should have been simple. But Jake looked at the item, then at her, and I saw that look cross his face. The one he got when he'd decided someone wasn't worth his time. "We can't accept this," he said flatly. The woman blinked, confused. "I'm sorry? It's defective. I have the receipt right here." "The box is damaged," Jake interrupted, tapping the corner where there was a small dent. "We can only accept returns in original condition." I felt my chest tighten. The policy said nothing about the box needing to be perfect. It was about the product being defective. The woman's face fell. "But I didn't damage it. It came like this. The blender doesn't work." "Ma'am, I don't make the rules." Jake's voice was rising now, just enough that people nearby were starting to look. "If you have a problem with our policy, you can call corporate, but I can't help you." There was something in the way he said it, dismissive, almost cruel, that made my hands clench. The woman wasn't being difficult. She wasn't yelling or making a scene. She was just asking for what she was entitled to, and Jake was humiliating her because he could. "This is ridiculous," the woman said, her voice shaking slightly. Not with anger, with the kind of frustration that comes when you're too exhausted to fight but too principled to walk away. "I spent $80 on a product that doesn't work, and you're telling me—" "I'm telling you," Jake said, cutting her off again, "that I can't process this return. If you'd like to leave, that would be great. You're holding up the line." There was no line. Just 3 other employees pretending not to watch, and a couple of customers who had stopped browsing to stare. The woman's hands were shaking as she held the receipt. I recognized that shake. I'd felt it myself 100 times. It was the shake of someone who was used to being small, used to being dismissed, and was reaching the limit of how much more they could take. And that's when something inside me snapped. Maybe it was because I saw myself in her. Maybe it was because I'd spent 2 years swallowing my pride and I'd finally had enough. Maybe it was because I thought about Emma, and how I never wanted her to grow up thinking it was okay to be treated like this. I don't know. But before I could talk myself out of it, I was walking toward the desk. "Jake," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can I talk to you for a second?" He turned to look at me, irritation flashing across his face. "I'm busy, Sarah. This will just take a second," I said. Then I turned to the woman and smiled. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry for the confusion. Let me help you." Jake's jaw tightened. "Sarah, step back to your station. The return policy covers defective products within 30 days, I said, ignoring him and reaching for the blender. "This qualifies. I can process it for you right now." The woman looked between me and Jake, uncertainty in her eyes. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or worried for me. Honestly, I didn't know either. "Sarah," Jake's voice dropped low, dangerous. "You do not have authorization to override my decision. Get back to your station, now." But I was already scanning the receipt, my hands moving faster than my brain could second-guess itself. "There's nothing to override. This is standard policy. She has every right to this return." That's when Jake stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his coffee breath. "You just ended your career here, sweetheart," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The store went silent. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I'd done it. I'd finally crossed the line I'd been terrified to cross for 2 years, and there was no going back. But then the woman looked at me, really looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something I hadn't expected. Recognition. Not like she knew me, but like she understood exactly what I'd just risked. "Actually," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension, "I think her career is just beginning." The words didn't make sense. Jake laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," the woman said, and suddenly she didn't seem tired anymore. She stood straighter, her voice firmer. "This young woman just demonstrated more integrity and customer service in 2 minutes than you've shown this entire interaction. I'd say her career prospects are looking pretty good right now." Jake's face went red. "Ma'am, with all due respect—" "I don't think you know what respect means," she interrupted calmly. She turned back to me. "What's your name?" "Sarah," I managed, still processing what was happening. "Sarah," she repeated like she was memorizing it. "Thank you for your help today. I won't forget this." She took the refund I'd processed, gave me one last meaningful look, and walked out of the store. The second she was gone, Jake turned on me. "My office. Now." I followed him on shaking legs, past Lisa, who gave me a sympathetic look, past the other employees who suddenly found their tasks very interesting. His office was small and cluttered, with motivational posters on the walls that felt deeply ironic given the kind of manager he was. He slammed the door behind us. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "I was doing my job," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Doing your job?" He laughed incredulously. "Your job is to follow my instructions. Your job is to respect the chain of command. Your job is not to undermine me in front of customers and staff." She had a legitimate return. "I don't care." He slammed his hand on the desk, making me flinch. "I don't care if she had a receipt signed by God himself. When I make a decision, you don't contradict me. You don't embarrass me. You don't make me look incompetent." I wanted to say that he'd done that all by himself, but I bit my tongue. "I'm writing you up," he continued, "and I'm recommending to HR that we start termination proceedings." The words hit me like ice water. Termination. I thought about Emma, about our rent, about the stack of bills on my kitchen counter. "Jake, please." "Please what?" He sneered. "Please don't hold you accountable for insubordination. Please let you disrespect me again." "I wasn't trying to disrespect you. I was trying to help a customer." "You were trying to make yourself look good at my expense." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with something like satisfaction. "You know what your problem is, Sarah? You think you're better than this place. You think you're better than me, but you're not. You're a single mother working retail because you don't have any other options, and if you think standing up for some random customer is going to change that, you're even more naive than I thought." Each word was designed to hurt, and it worked. Because he was right about one thing. I didn't have other options. I needed this job. I needed the health insurance it barely provided. I needed the paycheck that kept my daughter fed and housed. "You can go back to your station," Jake said dismissively, "and think very carefully about whether you want to keep this job or not. Because one more stunt like that, and you're done." I walked out of his office feeling hollowed out. Lisa caught my eye as I passed, mouthing, "Are you okay?" I nodded, even though I wasn't. The rest of the day was torture. Every time I saw Jake, my stomach twisted. Every time a customer approached, I second-guessed myself. Should I help them? Would it get me in more trouble? By the time my shift ended, I was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. I picked up Emma from Mrs. Chen's apartment, forcing a smile as my daughter chattered about her day at school. She'd gotten an A on her spelling test. She'd played tetherball at recess. Her friend Mia had brought cookies for everyone's birthday. Normal, beautiful, 7-year-old concerns. I held her hand as we walked the half block to our apartment, and I felt the weight of what I'd done pressing down on me. What if I lost this job? What if I couldn't find another one? What if we ended up evicted, homeless, scrambling? That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and started searching for job openings. Retail positions, administrative work, anything that might pay close to what I was making. But everywhere I looked, the requirements seemed impossible or the pay was even worse. I was still awake at 2 a.m. staring at job listings when my phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. "Are you okay? Jake was bragging to everyone after you left about how he's getting you fired." My hands tightened around the phone. Of course he was. That was exactly the kind of person he was. He'd humiliate someone and then celebrate it. I didn't respond. What was there to say? The next few days were a nightmare. Jake made sure of it. He scheduled me for the worst shifts. Early mornings that meant leaving Emma with Mrs. Chen before school. Late nights that meant paying extra for childcare. He criticized everything I did. Folded a sweater wrong. Smiled too much at a customer. Didn't smile enough at another. He was building a case, documenting every tiny infraction, real or imagined. I could feel the noose tightening. The other employees treated me like I was contagious. No one wanted to be associated with someone Jake had marked for termination. Only Lisa still talked to me, and even she did it quietly when he wasn't looking. "You should start looking for another job," she whispered during a break, "before he pushes you out." "I am," I admitted. "It's not going well." 2 weeks after the incident with the woman and the blender, I got called into HR. My heart was pounding as I walked down the narrow hallway to the administrative offices. This was it. They were going to fire me. The HR manager, Patricia, was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain and a perpetually tired expression. She gestured for me to sit. "Sarah, I'll get right to the point. We've received complaints about your performance from your supervisor." "Jake," I said flatly. "Yes." He's documented several instances of insubordination, failure to follow protocol, and disruption of store operations. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were write-ups I'd never seen, incidents that were either exaggerated or completely fabricated. "This is ridiculous," I said, flipping through the pages. "Half of these things never happened." "Are you saying your supervisor is lying?" Patricia asked, her tone neutral but her implication clear. I looked at her, at this woman who probably had her own quotas to meet, her own pressures from above. She wasn't going to help me. She was here to process the paperwork. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "We're placing you on a performance improvement plan," Patricia said. "You'll have 30 days to demonstrate improvement in the areas your supervisor has flagged. If you can't meet those standards, we'll have to let you go." 30 days. 1 month to prove myself according to standards Jake would make impossible to meet. "Is there anything else?" I asked, standing up. Patricia hesitated, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like sympathy flash across her face. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I've worked here 12 years. I've seen a lot of supervisors come and go. Just keep your head down. Do your job. Don't give him ammunition." It was the closest thing to advice or support I was going to get. I nodded and left. When I got back to the floor, Jake was waiting near my station, that smug smile on his face. He knew where I'd been. Of course he knew. He'd orchestrated it. "Welcome back," he said pleasantly. "Let's make sure these next 30 days are really productive, shall we?" I didn't respond. I just went back to work, straightening handbags with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't let themselves. That night, I did something I'd sworn I'd never do. I called my ex-husband, Mark. We'd been divorced for 2 years, and in that time, our communication had been minimal and usually hostile. He'd left me for a woman he worked with, moved across town, and treated Emma like an obligation he resented. But I was desperate. "What do you want, Sarah?" He answered on the third ring, already annoyed. "I need help," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "Emma and I might be in trouble. I'm probably going to lose my job, and I need you to step up with support payments. Maybe take Emma a few extra days a week until I can find something else." There was a long pause. Then he laughed. "You've got to be kidding me." "Mark, I'm serious. I'm barely hanging on." "That's not my problem." He cut me off. "You're the one who wanted the divorce. You're the one who wanted full custody. I pay what the court ordered, and that's it. If you can't handle your own life, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to be a hero." He hung up. I sat there in the dark of my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, and felt something crack inside me. The next 3 weeks were a blur of anxiety and exhaustion. I worked every shift Jake assigned, no matter how unreasonable. I followed every rule to the letter. I didn't contradict him, didn't question him, didn't even make eye contact if I could help it. I was trying to disappear. But Jake wasn't satisfied with compliance. He wanted submission. He wanted me broken. One afternoon, he called me over to help with a difficult customer, a man angry about a pricing error. Jake let the situation escalate, stood back with his arms crossed, and watched as the customer berated me. When I handled it professionally and resolved the issue, Jake wrote me up for creating a hostile interaction with a valued customer. It was absurd. It was also effective. My 30-day review was approaching, and I knew, we all knew, that Jake had already decided the outcome. I'd stopped sleeping more than a few hours a night. Emma started asking why I looked so sad. I told her I was just tired, but 7-year-olds are smarter than we give them credit for. She started leaving little drawings on my pillow. Stick figures of the two of us holding hands, hearts and flowers in bright crayon. Each one made me want to cry. It was day 27 when everything changed. I was working the morning shift, organizing a new shipment of winter coats, when I heard commotion near the front of the store. At first, I ignored it. There was always some drama, some customer complaint or employee issue. But then I heard Jake's voice louder than usual, with an edge of panic I'd never heard before. "I'm sorry, but you can't just walk in here without an appointment." "I don't need an appointment," a woman's voice replied, calm and authoritative. "I own this company." My heart stopped. I turned slowly, and there she was, the woman from 3 weeks ago, the one with the defective blender. Except now she was wearing an expensive suit, her hair was professionally styled, and she had an entire entourage with her, people in business attire carrying tablets and looking very official. Jake had gone pale. I I didn't know you were coming. That was the point, she said coolly. She looked around the store, her eyes taking in every detail, until they landed on me. Our eyes met across the floor, and she smiled. A small, knowing smile that made my pulse race. You, she said, walking toward me. Sarah, right? I could barely speak. Yes, ma'am. I'm Victoria Chen, she said, extending her hand. CEO of Henderson's. I don't believe we were properly introduced last time. My hand was shaking as I shook hers. Victoria Chen. I'd heard the name before. She was the new CEO who'd taken over 6 months ago. The company had sent out a generic email about it, but I'd never seen a photo. Never imagined she'd be someone who'd walk into a store and pretend to be a regular customer. I remember you, I managed. I certainly remember you, she said warmly. Then her expression shifted, became more serious. I'd like to speak with you privately. Would you come with me? I glanced at Jake, whose face had gone from pale to red. He looked like he wanted to explode but couldn't figure out how without making things worse. Of course, I said. Victoria turned to one of her associates. Please escort Mr. Mitchell to the break room and have him wait there. I'll speak with him shortly. Ms. Chen, I can explain, Jake started. Break room, Victoria repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Now. We went to Jake's office. The irony wasn't lost on me, and Victoria closed the door. One of her associates stood outside, presumably to ensure privacy. Victoria gestured for me to sit, then took the chair across from me. I'm going to be direct with you, Sarah. 3 weeks ago, I came to this store as part of an undercover evaluation. We've been receiving complaints about management practices at several locations, and I wanted to see the problems firsthand. What I witnessed that day, how your supervisor treated me, and how you intervened, told me everything I needed to know about this location's leadership. My mouth was dry. I didn't know who you were. I know. That's what made your actions so meaningful. She leaned forward slightly. I've spent the last 3 weeks investigating this store. I've reviewed employee files, complaint records, turnover rates. Do you know that this location has the highest staff turnover in the entire company? 40% annually. I shook my head, though I wasn't surprised. I've also reviewed your file specifically, Victoria continued. You've been written up 6 times in the past 3 weeks. Prior to that incident, you'd never had a single complaint in 2 years. She paused. Would you like to tell me what's been happening here? And suddenly, after weeks of holding everything in, the dam broke. I told her everything. About Jake's intimidation tactics, his impossible standards, the way he targeted employees he saw as weak. About Lisa and her 3 write-ups for helping customers. About the constant fear, the anxiety that kept me up at night. About my daughter's drawings and my ex-husband's refusal to help, and the 30 days I'd been given to prove myself according to criteria, designed to make me fail. I told her about the performance review scheduled for 3 days from now that everyone knew would end in my termination. Victoria listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with every word. When I finally stopped, my hands were shaking and my eyes were burning with unshed tears. I'm sorry, I said, wiping at my face. I know you probably can't do anything about it. He's been here 15 years. He knows how to cover himself. And I probably shouldn't have contradicted him that day, but I just couldn't stand watching him treat you that way. Stop, Victoria said gently. You have nothing to apologize for. What you did that day was exactly what every employee in this company should do. Put the customer first and act with integrity. She stood up, walked to the window that overlooked the sales floor. I could see Jake in the break room, visible through the glass walls, pacing like a caged animal. Here's what's going to happen, Victoria said, still looking out the window. Jake Mitchell's employment with Henderson's is terminated effective immediately. I'll be conducting exit interviews with every employee at this location to document the full extent of his misconduct. Anyone he's written up unjustly will have those records expunged. She turned back to me. As for you, Sarah, I'd like to offer you a position as regional manager for our Eastern District. It would involve overseeing 15 stores, including this one. The salary is $75,000 with full benefits, company car, and performance bonuses. You'd start in 2 weeks, which should give you time to arrange childcare and make any necessary adjustments. I stared at her. $75,000. I was making $32,000. I don't have management experience, I stammered. You have something more valuable, Victoria said. You have integrity. You have courage. And you have the customer-first mentality that this company desperately needs in its leadership. She pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back. Think about it. This is my direct line. Call me by Friday with your answer. I don't need until Friday, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. I accept. Victoria smiled, a real smile this time, warm and genuine. Excellent. I'll have HR draw up the paperwork. In the meantime, I need to handle Mr. Mitchell. She opened the door and I followed her out. The entire store had gone silent. Everyone was watching. Jake was emerging from the break room and I could see the moment he spotted me with Victoria. His expression shifted from anxiety to fury. You! He spat, pointing at me. You did this! You went crying to corporate? Actually, Victoria interrupted, her voice cutting through his rage like ice. She didn't say a word about you until I asked. Everything I needed to know I saw with my own eyes 3 weeks ago. The investigation I launched was based entirely on my own observations and subsequent findings. Jake's mouth opened and closed. You can't fire me. I've been with this company for 15 years. And in those 15 years, you've created a toxic work environment, violated company policy repeatedly, and driven away dozens of talented employees. Your termination is effective immediately. Security will escort you out. 2 security guards appeared as if on cue. Jake looked around wildly, as if searching for an ally, but every employee he'd terrorized was watching in silence. Some looked shocked. Others, like Lisa, looked quietly triumphant. This is bullshit, Jake snarled. You're making a huge mistake. This store will fall apart without me. I sincerely doubt that, Victoria said coolly. Goodbye, Mr. Mitchell. As security led him away, still protesting, Victoria turned to address the assembled staff. I apologize for the disruption. I know this is shocking, but I want to assure you all that Henderson's is committed to providing a respectful, professional work environment. Over the next few days, I'll be meeting with each of you individually to hear your experiences and concerns. In the interim, Sarah here will be acting as temporary manager of this location before moving into her new role as regional manager. There were gasps. I felt every eye turn to me. Some surprised, some skeptical, but many, like Lisa's, filled with something that looked like hope. Sarah, Victoria said, turning to me, would you like to say anything? My throat was tight. What could I possibly say? That I was terrified? That I had no idea what I was doing? That 3 weeks ago I'd been on the verge of losing everything? But then I looked at Lisa, remembered her shaking hands and her third write-up. I thought about every employee who'd been too scared to speak up, too afraid of losing their job to defend themselves or their coworkers. I thought about Emma's drawings and the promise I'd made to myself to give her more. I know this is unexpected, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And I know I'm not who any of you expected to see in this position. But I promise you this, no one here will ever be treated the way we've been treated. No one will be written up for doing the right thing. No one will be afraid to come to work. I paused, swallowing hard. We're going to make this the kind of store we'd want to shop in. The kind of workplace we'd want our kids to have someday. And we're going to do it together. There was a moment of silence. Then Lisa started clapping. Slowly, others joined in. Not everyone. Some were still processing, still uncertain, but enough. Enough to feel like maybe, just maybe, this could work. Victoria nodded approvingly. I'll be in town for the rest of the week, she said to me quietly. I'll have my assistant set up meetings with you daily to help with the transition. You won't be alone in this. That night, I picked Emma up from Mrs. Chen's and took her out for pizza. Something we almost never did because I was always counting every dollar. As we sat in the booth, her small hands covered in marinara sauce, I told her that things were going to change, that Mommy got a new job, that we might be able to move to a nicer apartment, that I'd be home more. Does this mean you won't be sad anymore? She asked, those 7-year-old eyes so perceptive it hurt. Yeah, baby, I said, reaching across to wipe sauce from her chin. I think it does. That night after she was asleep, I sat on our threadbare couch and let myself cry. Really cry, for the first time in months. Not from fear or exhaustion or desperation, but from relief, from disbelief, from the overwhelming realization that sometimes doing the right thing actually mattered. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Victoria was true to her word. Her assistant scheduled daily check-ins, and she provided me with resources, training, and most importantly, trust. The staff at the store slowly began to relax, to smile more, to treat customers with genuine warmth instead of fearful compliance. Lisa became my unofficial second in command, and together we started implementing changes: flexible scheduling, proper training programs, an anonymous suggestion box that actually got read. Within a month, the store's customer satisfaction scores had jumped 15%. Employee turnover stopped almost entirely. People started wanting to work at our location. I found an apartment 3 blocks from Emma's school. Nothing fancy, but it had 2 bedrooms, updated appliances, and a landlord who actually fixed things when they broke. Emma got her own room for the first time in 2 years. She decorated it with her drawings and a new set of markers I could finally afford to buy her. Mark called once, after word somehow got back to him about my new position. "I heard about your promotion," he said, his tone hovering between grudging respect and annoyance. "That's good for you." "Thanks," I said flatly. "I was thinking maybe I could take Emma more often now, since you'll be busier with work." "No," I said simply. "You had your chance to step up when I needed help. Now I don't need anything from you except the support payments you're legally obligated to make. And if you try to fight me on custody because you suddenly think there's something in it for you, I will bury you in legal fees." There was a long pause. Then he hung up. I never heard from him again about wanting more time with Emma. Funny how that worked. 6 months into my role as regional manager, Victoria invited me to corporate headquarters for a leadership summit. It was my first time in the main office, a sleek building downtown with glass walls and modern art in the lobby. As I walked through those halls, past executives in expensive suits, I kept thinking about that day in the store. About standing behind the counter and watching a woman get dismissed and humiliated. About the choice I'd made to step in, not knowing who she was or what would happen. "You've done remarkable work," Victoria told me during our one-on-one meeting. "The Eastern District's performance has improved across every metric. More importantly, your stores have become models for the culture we're trying to build company-wide." She paused, looking at me with that same assessing expression she'd had that first day. "I'm creating a new position, Vice President of Store Operations. It would mean relocating to headquarters, overseeing all regional managers, and playing a key role in shaping the future of this company. I'd like you to consider it." VP. I was 33 years old. 2 years ago, I'd been a floor associate terrified of losing my job. "I don't know if I'm ready," I said honestly. "Neither did I when they made me CEO," Victoria replied with a slight smile. "But you know what I've learned? Ready is a myth. There's only willing." I took the position. Emma and I moved to the city, a real apartment with a doorman and a park across the street. She started at a new school where they had art programs and a library that stayed open after hours. She made friends. She stopped leaving drawings on my pillow because she didn't need to anymore. She could just tell me about her day over dinner, which we ate together most nights now. On her 9th birthday, we threw a party in our apartment. Real friends came, not just kids whose parents I'd begged for playdates. There was cake and decorations and laughter that filled every room. As I watched her blow out her candles, I thought about that woman in the store, tired and shaking, holding a receipt for a blender that didn't work. I thought about how easy it would have been to look away, to stay safe, to let someone else deal with the injustice. And I thought about the version of us that would exist if I had. Emma would still be sharing a bedroom with me in that old apartment. I'd still be counting pennies and losing sleep and teaching my daughter that the world was a place where you had to make yourself small to survive. Instead, I taught her something else. I taught her that standing up matters. That integrity isn't just a word. It's a choice you make even when it's terrifying, even when it costs you everything you think you can't afford to lose. A year after that confrontation in the store, Victoria and I were having coffee in her office when she brought up that day again. "Do you know why I came to that specific store?" she asked. "Because of the complaints," I said. "No." She shook her head. "I mean, yes, there were complaints, but there are always complaints. I chose that store because 15 years ago, when I was starting out in retail, I worked there. And the manager then was exactly like Jake Mitchell. Petty, cruel, drunk on the small amount of power he had." She looked out her window at the city below. "I lasted 3 months before I quit. I told myself it was the smart move, that I'd find something better. But the truth is, I was ashamed. Ashamed that I didn't stand up, didn't fight back, didn't protect the other women working there who couldn't afford to leave." She turned back to me. When I became CEO, I promised myself I'd go back to that store, that I'd see if anything had changed. And when I saw Jake treating me exactly how I'd been treated 15 years earlier, I thought, nothing ever changes. But then you stepped in. Her eyes were bright. You reminded me that people can change things, that one person's courage can reshape everything. So thank you, Sarah. Not just for helping me that day, but for showing me that the culture I'm trying to build here is actually possible. 5 years have passed since that day now. Emma is 12, thriving in a school she loves, talking about maybe becoming a lawyer or a CEO herself someday. I'm still at Henderson's, though my title has changed again, Chief Operating Officer now. Victoria retired last year and personally recommended me as her successor, though I declined. I'm not ready to be CEO. Maybe someday, but not yet. I still think about Jake sometimes. Wonder where he ended up, whether he learned anything from what happened. Probably not. People like that rarely do. But I also think about all the employees whose lives changed because one customer got mistreated and one floor associate decided she'd had enough. Lisa is a store manager now, one of our best. The woman who'd been written up for helping customers is now training others to do the same. And somewhere out there in 15 stores across the Eastern District and beyond, there are employees who come to work without fear, who know that doing the right thing won't get them punished, who understand that they matter, all because of a defective blender, a tired customer, and a moment when I chose to believe that standing up was worth the risk. It was. It always is.